What we believe is that a breakthrough manager consistently makes generous assumptions. And in our breakthrough manager class, one of the generous assumptions that we talk about a lot, and there seems to be a lot of examples around this, is that no one is misbehaving, right?
Yeah.
Because they have reasons for doing what they do. What do you think about that, Flame?
I love that generous assumption because you may remember that I'm a recovering perfectionist, right? I have a pretty acute awareness of when things are wrong and they need to be fixed. My brain is like a laser for that. And knowing what we know about coaching, right? Coaching is so much about our mindset, about how we're viewing people. And what we're doing when we make a generous assumption is to draw a line in the sand between what we might call our automatic negative thinking, right? That cognitive bias that's always looking for how people are out to get us and we're going to get hurt and is trying to keep us safe. But then we don't make generous assumptions. We assume the worst about people and we assume the situation is going to turn out very poorly. And then it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? It produces bad results, inconsistency, hard feelings, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're in our coaching stance, when we're in our breakthrough manager stance, we want to draw the line that says, we're not going to do that. We know what that gets us. That gets us a world of frustration, resignation, and poor results. What we want is creativity, collaboration, insight, innovation. Well, in order to do that, we got to get up into that prefrontal cortex of the brain, right? Mm-hmm. And generous assumptions do that. It's like shifting consciously out of the amygdala into the prefrontal cortex. And that produces seemingly miraculous results.
Absolutely.
Like, have you ever gotten an email that, maybe had a little heat to it? Like, hey, I need you to fix this right now.
Yes. And what happens right away when you actually see the subject line of that email?
Fight, or freeze, right? Just like,
right. Sometimes you don't even want to open the email because you know that it's going to change everything.
I certainly don't. I have a freeze preference out of fight, flight, or freeze. And so I get very like, I'll do that later, and then 3 days have passed and I haven't done it. Now I'm stalling the work.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You end up ignoring it instead of dealing with the real issue and, really kind of trying to understand what's the issue here? How do we resolve the issue? And you have healthy conversation around it.
Absolutely. And you're making me think of that metaphor of blind men touching different sides of an elephant. Have you ever seen this visual?
Yeah.
And if you were to ask the blind man who's touching the trunk, what's an elephant? He would have one answer about the length of the trunk and, no, it's like a hose, right? But if you ask a man who's touching the flank, he would say, it's not like a hose, it's like a whole wall of, with bristles on it. And the man who's touching the foot would have a different answer and the tail, a different answer. And the truth is it's all of these things pertain, right? These are like the good reasons that people have for doing what they do is that they're looking from one perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's so important to really understand different perspectives and different viewpoints. Because again, if you're touching that one person that is touching that one piece of elephant feels something very different than the other person on the other side touching another piece of that elephant, right?
Yes. And you said something to me earlier that I thought was really important here, which is that it's up to each of us to recognize that there is an elephant here, that my instincts would have me shut down or start a fight or do something to protect myself. But what I really need to do here, what I'm really responsible for, is checking out all the other sides of that elephant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that's the solution that sees the whole elephant is the solution that's really going to be meaningful. It's going to be collaborative. It's going to innovate about something because it has an awareness that if we're in our silos, we don't have.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it all starts with this generous assumption, which seems so simple, but it's actually very hard to catch ourselves when we're not making generous assumptions. They feel so real, don't they?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Being in that that mindset where we're protecting ourselves, right? And when something happens, talking about that email, just getting that email, right away, instead of thinking about the other side, what we tend to do is place blame or, immediately, what is that person doing? Why is that person messing up my project? Right? That's not a very healthy way of working as a team. And it does require vulnerability too, to admit perhaps that there may be a different perspective, or perhaps there was some sort of an error or a mistake that needs to be resolved together.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about, oh man, that's Susie. She's always, blocking the things. She doesn't like me, whatever. When really Susie's in the finance department and she's aware of a whole level of compliance that would make it impossible to institute the solution you think is best.
Right.
And Bob over in IT, he's got a different slice of the Venn diagram, right? Where he's going, well, yeah, but the thing you're asking for is a significant investment of hardware, that we can't just start doing that, right? And then those who are actually on the ground in the customer service department going, yeah, but this is like 8 months of training, and we just finished doing X, Y, and Z, right? And there's probably a Venn diagram where there's a really interesting solution in the middle, but we have to really deal with a lot of complexity in the meantime.
So until we can have those healthy conversations around the real issue, there will not be resolve. There will be only judgments. And so in order to be a breakthrough manager, again, it's about really having those generous assumptions. No one is misbehaving. People are just doing their job, and they are acting and performing from their own viewpoint.
And when we can be curious about what that is, we're likely to produce alignment, creativity, insight, and the innovation that we really crave in the business world that produces real dollars, real money. Real meaningful results.
Yes.
Thank you, Flame.
You're welcome, Donna.